traffic wherever you go.
War is not a pleasant thing. War is gruesome. I mean, talk about war, you know. These are the things that affect certain people certain ways. And the brain, you know, it's a sad, funny thing. You don't even know how it's going to affect you. My job was a radar man. The job of the radar man on the screen was to keep the ship in position. The way that we did that, we'd have to report to the bridge periodically the position of the ship and the distance from the other ship. And that's how they kept the ships in line. Now, had you made a mistake, you could run into another ship, and boy, that would be a general court-martial. So you had to be right on your toes. And the plotter, whenever we picked up what we call a bogey, which was something coming on the radar screen, first thing we do, we flash an IFF, which would mean identification, friend or foe. If he was a friend, he signaled back. If we got no response, and we signaled again, and they'd give a signal for general quarters. Now, general quarters, everyone had a battle station assigned to them. And you see everybody running, getting on their stations, and see whatever was coming up in the event that it was a foe. This is where, yeah, this is where we saw that crippled plane coming in, one of our own people. It was damaged, the radio control was out, radio receiver was gone, and he had no way of identifying himself. So luckily the two planes went out to meet him and escorted him back to the aircraft. But he came pretty damn close, I'll tell you. Everybody was right on him. Boy, they were going to blast the hell out of him. Isn't it? This is something that amazed me. I got up standing my watch one day, and I'm looking at the scope. I got nothing on it. Geez, I was kind of embarrassed. I calibrated. Geez, nothing. Scope again, nothing. I didn't want to ask anybody. I thought, gee, I ought to know my job, you know, and I didn't know what was happening. So I finally looked over to the radar man on the plotting board, and I said, gee, you know, I can't get anything on here. And of course, there's a Lieutenant J.G. that was serving, but he didn't hear me. I made sure of that. But I mean, I just was embarrassed, is what it was. And he says, well, you won't get anything on it. He says, we're 10 miles out ahead of the task force. He says, and we're out on picket, and which means that we try to draw the enemy out. We'd be the first ones that they'd contact if they came out. Well, I'll tell you, I think I could have used a new set of diapers then. Because that's the first time I knew about that.
See now. Look here. This, yeah. This is all familiar to me here.
We were out there for quite a while sometimes, and there'd be a couple of months, 3 months, and we'd get a little island, and they'd give fellas beer parties. You know, they let them go up to the island. I never went because I didn't drink beer, and but they'd give you a little break like that. But you look at those islands down there, and I'll tell you, they look so peaceful and quiet with the coral shores. You wonder, I'd look over some of them and wonder how there ever could be anything destructive in those places, you know, because it looks so peaceful and quiet.
That's the thing that saved us from the typhoon. Right there, that shamrock. We lost a couple of 3 destroyers.
And USS Sullivan's emerged unscathed. And what happened is that they always attributed to the lucky logo, the shamrock on the funnel. That's the only ship you'll find that has a shamrock on the funnel. You know, there was a lucky ship. They call it a lucky ship. Oh, I didn't tell you about the little Jap prisoners we had on there. We picked up about 6 Jap prisoners. Of course, every day we'd bring them up, you know, for a little air. And I go down and talk to them, you know.
We used to have them right along here. Right in here.
And I remember saying to them, I'd say, you know, he'd tell me certain words, and one word I remember. I don't remember the others, but they gave me quite a few words. He says,
Kuichita, Kuichita. It's French, Spanish, Japanese. They taught me fewer Japanese words, but I forgot them. All I remember is Kuichita.
So I said, I think that means now good morning, see? So he says, you got good Japanese accent. I said, yeah, I got good Japanese accent, all right.
And, you know, they were nice kids. I used to talk to them.
As I say, we brought them up for air about an hour a day and so, and one of them looked out and he saw the Enterprise and saw all these other aircraft carriers, you know, and he said, how many of those you got? He pointed his finger and said, how many of those you got? So you always got like one of them that could speak English, you know, he always got 1 or 2 could speak English. And gee, there was an old chief's name there, Dave Sullivan his name was. He was an old Navy man, you know, been in for years. He says, how many we got? He says, we got 100 of them, and he says, and they were all made at Pearl Harbor. So he clapped right up.
One fella was there and said he didn't understand English, you know, and one old chief was talking to him, and he said, so the chief says, give me your stuff, I'm going to cut him open. And he stepped back, as he knew what he was saying. That's the lighter part of it. Yeah. Yeah, this is Chief's bug. You see, when you're a chief, you get bunked by yourself.
Yeah.
Let's go down into the galley. Yeah, this is it. I remember this well. I was on board about a day, and of course I remember this well. I was aboard about a day, and of course they call these ships tin cans because they're like a tin can on the ocean. And my bunk was right here. It was on the bulkhead. You know, they put extra bunks in because of the extra crew members they had during wartime. Peacetime is a smaller crew. But what happened with me is I used to have a night watch, and you know, I had to sleep days. And of course, days you'd have sailors drinking coffee and talking, and you know, sometimes I couldn't get any sleep. And I used to have to work around it. But this was all, and I remember, as I say, and I started to say, I was in here the first day I think I was aboard, and I sat right here. And there's a fellow sitting here there, and pretty soon, oh, I got so seasick, I went over and threw up right in this corner here. Right here, right near the, threw up right here. And of course, everybody scattered. The ones that were aboard longer than I was, of course, all had their sea legs. After a few days, you got your sea legs, so it didn't bother you anymore. But boy, that was an awful feeling. I remember one fellow was so sick, he was on the fantail there, and those waves were coming right over him. He wouldn't even move. He probably was afraid he was going to live. Yeah, I remember sitting at these tables eating beans on Saturday morning and Wednesday morning. But many of those fellas loved to drink coffee. I never liked coffee. Well, at that time, I never drank coffee. Yeah. Take every possible step to save your ship as long as a bit of hope remains. Keep cool, don't give up the ship. You know, during boot camp, they take you on a tour, a boot camp, familiarize you with the area, you know, and then a last stop was the brig. He says, and this is about, the chief says, this is about as close you ought to get to that. You know, but an interesting story, when I was down in radar school, down in Fort Lauderdale, this fella was at radar school with me, and he snuck out one. This was school, but you got to stay within the limits. So he snuck out one night. And don't you know that night they called him on an emergency that he had to leave for home, and they couldn't locate him in there. and he came back, he was AWOL, but he came back and he went on 7 days bread and water is what they do in the brig instead of going home on emergency leave. That was a sad thing, yeah. Well, rules are rules. You can't have everybody going to come, but that reminded me of it when they, you know, he says we were ever in the brig. But gee, we used to go over and sneak him. I used to go over and sneak him some stuff, you know, to eat because, geez, he was a nice guy, but he just fouled up like that, you know. But he was going home on leave, for emergency leave. So you see how it could happen? Luck wasn't with him that time. Ah, well, bread and water, 7 days. But I used to give him some of my food. Fort Lauderdale, we could get some stuff. I'll tell you one thing, I used to climb those hatches a lot faster when I was younger, 50 years ago. Now we're talking. Now we're talking. This is the place. You don't have any light, you don't get any lights on it outside there? There's the, now we're talking. This is the radar room. Now let's see the plotting board. There's a plotting board right there that I was mentioning. You remember more? I mentioned about the plotting board. Here it is right here. I remember we were on airstrikes to Tokyo, and it wasn't very bad. But for some reason, Lieutenant J.G. was sitting here, and I was on the radar, and suddenly he noticed something happening to me, and he says, "What seems to be the matter, DeAndrea?" And I said, "Gee, I don't know." I says, "I just not feeling just right." So he says, well, he says, he got a little nervous there. He says, you know, he says, look at the boys out there on Okinawa now. He says, and we're out here relatively safe. He says, so we're much better off than they are. And he sort of settled me down, but in my mind, I always felt my wife and kids probably wouldn't see them, but thank God everything turned out well. But this is the radar room. I spent so much time in here. But I'm not sorry, but I'm glad it's over. Lieutenant J.G. was so good to me, he just consoled me, and after that I seemed to be all right. But it just seemed that seemed to be falling apart for some reason. Well, that's... You want to know where I spent my time? This used to be my favorite sitting spot. Right there.
Have a seat, go ahead.
And I used to have my comic book I used to read. That's where I got all my education. Yeah. I tell you, I wouldn't want to change this experience for anything, but I wouldn't want to go through it again. I'll tell you. Okay, let's go, Chris. I think we're all set.